Uniforms folded, flag hangs on the wall. Traded steel and thunder for silence in the hall. The mission's over, the deployment's done, they said. But the war inside my head, it hasn't left its stain. Got the handshake, the thank you, the ticket back home. Now I'm standing on the sidewalk, feeling utterly alone. This freedom is a cage that I can't seem to break. Every single morning it's a future I might forsake. Lost the rhythm, lost the drive, the structure disappeared. The invisible wounds are the ones that I truly feared. I'm walking on a wire, the pressure's coming down. Is there anyone listening in this lonely town? Full speed ahead after battle.
Good evening and welcome to Full Speed Ahead After Battle right here on Military Broadcast Radio, the station where we don't just play music, we give veterans a voice. We start tonight with a number that most of you know, but none of us should ever accept, and that's 22. That is the number of veterans we lose to suicide every single day. But when they factor in our brothers and sisters in the first responder community and civilians standing beside them, that number climbs to nearly 30 souls lost every 24 hours. Think about it. In the time that it takes to finish this 1 hour broadcast, it's highly likely that one person will end their life. We're here to stop that clock, and we're here to talk about the transition from service to civilian life, to tackle mental health head on and provide the tactical support needed to drive those numbers down to zero. Before we dive in, we have some massive mission updates. February 4th, down at VFW, Post 10374 in Fort Worth, spaghetti dinner you don't want to forget, because we're hosting the absolute legend, Medal of Honor recipient, Dawn Ballard. Also, Donna Snow of the former Texas Flip and Move. They'll be discussing signing their books and, importantly, raising funds to support our veterans. So mark your calendars and let's pack the house for a great cause. Tonight, we're going to dive deep into the trenches of recovery, and joining me is Daniel McGowan. We're talking about the raw reality of drug and alcohol addiction and how to navigate that chaos to find that inner peace. And I'm not doing this alone. I've brought in a special guest co-host tonight, a legendary veteran in her own right, and a woman who knows what it means to serve and support, and someone I'm proud to call my mother. But the world really knows her as Grams. Grams, come on in. There you go. Come on over here. Grams, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad you could come down and visit this week.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
All righty. So you ready to get talking about, let's talk about real quick, you're a veteran yourself, right?
Yes, sir.
So talk about that. When and where?
I was a medic in the Army. I joined in 1980, right out of high school. And I served most of my time right here in the great state of Texas. I visited about every single base in the state of Texas.
All right. And I asked you in tonight because tonight we're talking about drug and alcohol addiction. And you have a little bit of experience with that with family member, right? So what was your experience? No? We'll keep it broad. How about that? She's got some experience, people. She's been there, done that. She's seen a few things. So we'll keep it at that. All right. So to this week, we are bringing in Daniel McGowan for our interview of the week.
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Daniel, welcome to Full Speed Ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Honored to be here. And, thank you both for your service. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So pleasure having you tonight. And, for the people viewing at home, Daniel and I had this discussion before, and I'd like to point it out just because it shows it takes a lot of people to get the help here, right? So, Daniel, you're not a veteran yourself. However, you do come from a background of drug and alcohol addiction, which a lot of our veterans do face on a daily basis. And that is one of the biggest things that leads to that suicide number, not just in veterans, but in civilian worldwide. And so that's why I asked you here tonight, right? So with that, why don't you kind of take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. So again, I'm Daniel McGowan. I always, whenever I introduce myself, I always start off with I'm a husband and a father, because no matter what else I do, those will always be the two most important things to me in this world. I'm also a certified alcohol and drug counselor, motivational speaker, interventionist. I do a lot of things in the recovery mental health world. And that's because it impacted my life so greatly. I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey with every chance to succeed. But once I put that drink or drug in me, right, like all bets were off, and I kind of didn't know where I was going to go and where I was going to end up. Today I have 15 years in recovery. But prior to that, I spent probably over a decade in the depths of addiction, detoxes, rehabs, jails, prisons, homelessness, psych wards, again, all directly related to drug and alcohol addiction. And, it was a long struggle, and I just really pride myself today in trying to, help people not have to walk that path that I walked. There's such a strong stigma around addiction, around mental health. And whatever I can do to help break that, I feel like that's my purpose in this world, and, just bringing awareness, bringing education, motivation, helping the world understand that people battling with addiction and mental health aren't bad people. It's not a choice that they're making.
Right.
And trying to bring that awareness. I think we've made some big strides recently in breaking that stigma, but we still have a long way to go. And that's kind of just what I'm trying to do. Wherever I can, whenever I can.
Yep, absolutely. So let's go back a little bit, because to be able to, and I'm sure you're aware of this, to be able to get to that good place, that find that inner peace, you've got to address the past and address that addiction and that darkness. A lot of our times, our veterans, when they come out of the service in that civilian world, they have that hard time finding that camaraderie, that brotherhood, that same structure, right, coming from the military. And that's where they start losing their way, and they start getting in with other groups that drink heavily or turn to the drugs because they know nothing else. Grams, you used to work in a maximum security prison, and I'm sure you saw a lot of addiction within the prison system as well, right? And so you got any background on that coming from the prison?
Yes, I actually retired from working into prison for 20 years. And yes, I did see a lot of drug addiction type cases in there and stuff, from all walks of life.
Sure.
Yeah. So Daniel, if you don't mind, let's get a little bit into your past. What brought you to where you are now? Because I know you went through some dark times. I did myself.
Sure.
So let's start in the beginning.
Yeah, I guess I could kind of start. I was actually speaking to some 8th graders today. That's something I've really been involved in, just speaking to kids in middle schools and high schools. And I was speaking to these 8th graders, and whenever I speak to 8th grade specifically, it kind of impacts me a little more, because when I rewind and go into my past, I look at me in 8th grade, right? And I was I was very popular, played a lot of sports, had a bunch of friends, really knew who I was and knew where I fit in, and kind of knew what my purpose was. Right. And then what happens? I go to high school the next year. I go to ninth grade, freshman year, and now I'm not that cool anymore. Right. Like, I'm not the best athlete anymore. I'm not the most popular. All my friend groups are kind of splitting into these different groups. And it's like, I don't know where I stand now, and then all the self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem starts creeping in. I go to a party freshman year. There's a bunch of upperclassmen there. Everyone's drinking. So I start drinking. I proceed to get drunk. What happens is everybody loves me now. I said, that's it. I figured it out. I figured out who I am. I figured out where I'm going to fit in, and I figured out who my friend group's going to be. I don't care that it's negative. I just need somewhere to fit in so I don't feel so alone. Right.
Right.
And that just proceeded, that progression just everything just kept progressing. I said, I'm going to smoke more weed and drink more alcohol than this high school's ever seen. And, proceeded to almost do that. Right. And in high school, it was kind of cool, so to say. Right.
Right.
But 21, 22, 23, everybody's moving on, getting married, having kids, finding careers. And I'm still working dead end jobs, just saving up money so I can drink and get high. Because why? Because there's a void, right? There was something missing in here, and I just had to figure out what that was. Unfortunately, it took me a long time to figure it out, but I was able to do that. And I think, I think that's important, right? Like, I think people get to a point where the drugs and the alcohol become a solution for something else, right? And we got to figure out what that solution is.
Right.
A lot of times, probably what you see with the kind of work you're doing is it becomes that solution to that trauma, to that PTSD. Like, I don't want to think about what I saw or what I went through.
Right.
And even though this drink or drug will just numb me where I don't have to think about that, right? But
Yeah.
Well, what happens, right? The drink or drug wears off. That original problem is still there. And now that alcoholism or addiction is progressing, and now you have two problems, right? Because you don't want to focus on that one problem because it's heavy. It's deep stuff to deal with, and that's what I always challenge people to, right? Like, that drink or that drug, that short-term solution is just causing longer wreckage. Where if we could try to find a way to flip it and go through that short-term pain, which, like, dealing with the trauma, the PTSD, the anxiety, the depression, the whatever problem we're trying to solve, right? If we could just flip it and go through that short-term pain and handle that problem directly, right? And then we get to the other side and we're stronger because of it, but that drink or that drug, it's instant gratification, right? Like, I take that drink or that drug, I feel those effects instantly. And I think sometimes as human beings, right, we like that short-term solution. We don't care about a week from now. We're worried about right now in the moment. I don't like the way I feel right now. Give me a drink of something to knock this feeling out of me instead of just pushing through it, and that's something I preach wherever I go is just like, what problem is this drink or drug your solution to? Because we're trying, again, a terrible solution, but that's what we're using it for sometimes. And we got to figure that out.
Yeah, because when we talk about veterans getting into drug addiction, alcohol addiction, it's because we suffer, like you said, the trauma, the PTSD, all those different experiences, battle, and when we come home, we don't want to subject our family and our friends to those memories, right? And so we don't want to open up and share that stuff with them so that they have that, and they're like, well, what did he do over there? Now they got all those memories racing in their minds about what we did. And so instead of, opening up, talk about it, facing it head on, we'd rather just try and kill the pain and kill the memories within our own head. And that's where we start drinking and doing drugs. And
Yeah.
like you said, it wears off and then that memory comes back up. And here we go back into that cycle. And it's a cycle. And so it's not just affecting you, though. The more you can drink a 6-pack, right? But at some point, that 6-pack's not going to work. So you're going to go to a 12-pack and a case and a fifth and a liter.
Sure.
And in the end, it's tearing you down physically, mentally. It's tearing your family, your friends down as well. And it destroys families. And so, that's what a lot of these veterans face. And they're afraid, like you said, that stigma of if I ask for help, now I'm the bad guy, right?
Sure.
People are going to look down on me, especially in the world today, trying to go for those jobs or anything like that. And man, if I tell these people I'm addicted to drugs, or maybe I don't want to go to that work event because there's alcohol and that's a trigger for me now, they're going to look at me funny, right?
Yeah,
and so that's what a lot of the veterans face. But so let's get into the work a little bit about, how you brought yourself out of that. What switched in your mind that says, I can no longer keep going this way?
Right. So I knew I couldn't keep going that way for a long time before I was able to do anything about it. Right. Like it became obvious. Right. And I think sometimes like I was just in so deep, like I just didn't really understand, like see if there was a way out, like I wanted out so bad. A quick story. Right. I remember I was, I was in the Middlesex County Jail. So Middlesex is a county here in New Jersey. And I called my sister. She was the only one who would even consider answering the phone for me at this time. And, I asked her to bail me out, which I knew I was going to get a hard no on, but I tried anyway. And then after that, I transitioned into, can you send me some money, right, for commissary so I can, try to live a little more comfortable while I'm here. And she said to me, she said, I'll send you money this one time, and then after this, just leave me alone. Like mom's sick and I can't deal with you right now. Right. Yeah. And that's how I found out my mom was dying of stage 4 lung cancer. Right. Wow. Because I was so immersed in drugs and alcohol, it was drugs and alcohol first, everything else distant second, including family. Right. That's just where it takes certain people, and I remember I got out in Middlesex County Jail and my sister tracked me down and said, if you have anything to say to mom, you better get over here and say it. You're running out of time. So, I went over to the hospital and I sat on the edge of my mom's bed and I poured my heart out. But I was a little too late, because like she was so weak from the chemotherapy that all I got in response from her was moans and groans. She was too weak to put a sentence together. And I left the hospital and I went to a bar to get drunk, right? Because, poor me, like my mom's dying, right? Like everybody feels sorry for me now, right? It's a very selfish disease, the alcoholism and addiction. Plus, I don't want to deal with the fact that my mom's passing away and I've been in active addiction for all these years, right? So let me go numb this instead of facing this problem head on. That's my solution for everything. My sister tracks me down again and says, mom just passed away, Now today I can sit here and tell you guys, like, I know my mom was waiting for her only son to get there before she let go. But in that moment, it was really tough, right? Because I didn't like the way I was living. I didn't see a way out. I was also a mama's boy growing up. Me and my mom had a great relationship until addiction took over. And then that kind of severed it. And here I am dealing with that guilt and shame of, wow, I was too late to the hospital to even hear what she had to say to me. Yeah. Mom passes away. My dad says to me, do you want to, be a pallbearer at your mom's funeral? And, of course I do, Dad. And, he says, well, just don't embarrass the family. And now I'm like, oh, how could you say that to me? Right. Right. Everything about me. How could you say that to me? I'm so insulted. All he meant was don't show up drunk, don't show up high, don't show up with one of your deadbeat friends that you're associated with, which he was in his right to say. And what I'm getting at is because I remember this like it was yesterday, right? I was in active heroin addiction at the time, right? And if I didn't have heroin every couple hours, I would get violently sick. So before my mom's funeral, I remember sitting outside the church, pulling up my sleeve on my dress shirt and injecting that needle into my arm And as I'm injecting that needle into my arm, I'm looking up to the sky and praying to a God that I definitely didn't understand and was still struggling to have that belief in that moment. But I was praying to somebody, right? Like, please, God, get me out of this mess as I'm injecting the heroin, right? And like, that's the contradiction. I want out so bad, but I'm in so deep. How do I get out?
Right.
And like, I wanted out of this mess way before I was able to do anything about it. Fast forward a little bit, because I want to answer your question. It's just going to take me a minute to get there, and
Good, man.
I was committing a lot of crimes at this time in my life to support my drug habit. And one day I was coming back from North Jersey in a bad urban area where I was, purchasing the heroin from. And my dad lived on a dead end street at the time. And my friend was driving. We turned onto the street and we could look up the street at my dad's house and see all the police sirens outside my house. My house was getting raided. The detectives outsmarted me. I thought I was, so smart and they were never going to catch me. But of course they did. And my friend said to me, he said, what do you want to do right now? Do you want to like kind of make a K-turn and we can get out of here? And I'm, in like 5 seconds, I made the decision. It was like, and go, where am I going to go? Like just go on the run, live in the woods. Right. And I remembered really quick that moment where I was putting that needle in my arm and praying to that God for a way out. And I said, you know what? Maybe this is the way out. Like, I can't stop on my own. I need some kind of consequence here to get me out of this mess, and prior to that, maybe a couple weeks prior, I was on the side of my dad's house, just broken mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I thought about suicide often, but I didn't want any more pain. You know what I mean? Like, and I figured that would just hurt even more. If there was a pill I could have took that would have guaranteed I didn't wake up, I would have took 2 of them just to make sure they worked. Like, that's just how spiritually I was broken at that point in my life. And I remember I was on the side of my dad's house, and my mom loved, when she was alive, she loved nothing more than her rose bushes. And, keep in mind, this is New Jersey, the middle of winter. It was, not a flower growing in sight. And I looked at my mom's rose bushes, and there was one rose growing in the middle of winter. And I filed that away. I didn't get clean and sober that day, but I filed that away. And then when, my friend asked me, do you want to get out of here? I remembered that rose, and I remember praying to that God I didn't really understand. And I said, I got to go face this. Maybe this is the way out that I've been looking for. And that was like the end and a new beginning all at the same time, because I went up there and, I was arrested, and, I went to the Monmouth County Jail here in New Jersey, and I spent about a year there before I went down to state prison. But it was the start of a new beginning, because, I remember I started going to AA and NA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, when I was in the county jail. And I remember this one man I remember still today, because he was another inmate, and we were sitting in a meeting in the gym at the county jail, guards all around us. And he was about 50 years old at the time, and he just came back from sentencing that day, and he signed for another 25 years. And he looked at everybody in the room and he said, "It's okay, guys, I'm finally free." And that, that blew my mind in a moment, because it was like, man, you're 50, you're going to do another 25 years, and you're talking about how you're free, and he just began to explain that, when he was out there, so-called in the free world, his family wanted nothing to do with him. Kids, grandkids weren't a part of his life. But since he was incarcerated and he was working on himself, and he was back in touch with his religion and his spirituality, and he was trying to better himself, his family was part of his life again. And to him, that was true freedom. You know, and I think about that man often because there's really no difference between me and him except that I was just given another chance, you know, and just out here making the most of it. So, you know, went down to state prison, finished my time. And then when I got out, I remember my dad saying to me, you know, you can come back and stay with me, but this is your last chance. Yeah. And in the past, he said that a few times to me before, but there was something different in his voice. There was something different in his eyes this time. I knew he meant like this was my last chance, you know, and I just hit the ground running with, you know, jumping into, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and just surrounding myself with a good group of strong men. You know, when we look at addiction, we look at, you know, physical dependence, mental obsession, and then spiritual malady, right? So for me, the physical dependence was long gone. The mental obsession was kind of starting to subside. You know, I wasn't just thinking about drugs and alcohol all day. And now I had to work on that next piece, that kind of like spiritual component, which, you know, when I say that, it doesn't have anything to do with religion or God if you don't want it. It's just that spiritual component, that's something in here that's missing. And how do I fill that? You know, and for me, it was just putting a bunch of strong men in my corner who taught me certain things, right? They taught me like, it's okay not to be okay, right? Like you mentioned kind of like a lot of what you see with the veterans before. It's like, sometimes we don't want to, you know, ask for help or we admit that we need help, right? Because that can be viewed upon as weakness sometimes, right? And a lot of times, I'm sure you see the world that you come from, a bunch of, you know, strong, you know, alpha type men. It's hard to ask another man like, hey, listen, I'm struggling. I need help right now.
Right.
Especially for me, like I didn't grow up in that household. You know, I didn't grow up in a house where I could say, hey, you know, Dad, you know, the way you talked to me earlier made me feel sad. You know, like I couldn't do that. You know, it was figure it out. You know, you couldn't really show that weakness. And, you know, the more I move forward in the addiction field, in the mental health field, I'm so passionate about just, you know, kind of letting people know, like, it's okay not to be okay. Like, so many times people, hey, how's it going today, Josh? How's it going today, Dan? Oh, I'm fine. Everything's good. Meanwhile, it could be far from that, but we're just so conditioned and programmed to just, you know, say everything's fine and everything's okay and I'll figure it out. And like, listen, life's hard, you know, life is hard and it's okay to need help. It's okay to have weak days. It's okay to like just need someone to be there for you. And that's, you know, it's the message that I just continue to carry.
And, you know, you just mentioned that the alpha type male, right? And we don't want to ask for that help from our guys. But what I try to remind all my guys is when you served, you asked for their help, right? To watch your six, to be on your left, to be on your right, cover your ass in battle. It's the same thing, right? You know, addiction, anything else, it's a different type of battle. But you still got to be able to ask for that help. And that's that mentality that we got to break.
We got to break
it. It's okay to ask people for help because it's just a different mission, right? You still got to, you can't do this alone. Coming out of addiction, coming out of the service, you can't do it alone. You got to have that support system with you. And, you know, another comment that you made was finding that higher power, right? And I had a conversation with a priest one time, and he explained to me that God doesn't necessarily stand for God, that God can stand for good order and discipline. And everybody's higher power is different, right? You might have God, you might have Buddha, Jesus, whatever it might be. You've got to find that higher power for you, that thing that's going to keep you driving forward. That's what's going to carry you out of the darkness. So, you know what? We're going to take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to start talking about the good side of recovery, you know, moving forward, the things that you're doing now to help other people with the addiction. So we'll be right back after these messages.
Great.
Been home about 6 months now, and I still have my doubts. Well, I'm not sure how I got here, or how I'm gonna get out. Well, my mama says I look the same as I did before I left. But if she could see inside of me, it would scare her to death. Well, I can still taste the powder from the barrel of my gun, and I can hear my sergeant screaming, "Run, soldier, run." And I can feel the backpack on my shoulders, God, it weighed a ton. And I see death in every single thought. Well, they taught me how to put that uniform on. I just can't get it off. Last Saturday they honored us in a small parade downtown. And when they shot off those fireworks, I nearly hit the ground. And while they smiled and cheered for us, all I could do was stare. 'Cause part of me is here at home, but part of me's back there. Well, I can still taste the powder from the barrel of my gun, and I can hear my sergeant screaming, "Run, soldier, run." And I can feel the backpack on my shoulders, God, it weighed a ton. And I see death in every single thought. They taught me how to put that uniform on. I just can't get it off. Yeah, there's no end in sight. 'Cause even though I'm home now, I'm still fighting for my life. Well, I can still taste the powder from the barrel of my gun, and I can hear my sergeant screaming, "Run, soldier, run." And I can feel the backpack on my shoulders, God, it weighed a ton. And I see death in every single thought. Well, they taught me how to put that uniform on. I just can't get it off. Well, the devil's won some battles, and he may win some more. But don't he know the American soldier will always win the war?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back here on Full Speed Ahead After Battle. That was Mitch Russell, A Soldier's Memoir. And just like if you caught that video, when you come out of the service and you leave everything that you've ever known while serving, doesn't mean that that uniform comes off, right? And much like addiction, just because you recover from something or you're in recovery doesn't mean that that history just goes away. It's always there with you, and it's something you have to take that and move forward. So uniform is off, so I'm still taking, my leadership skills, my teamwork, the dedication, the power, all of that, just in a different uniform and carrying forward. And Daniel, I see we've got a lot of great comments coming in about supporting you, and you're doing some amazing work out there in your recovery. So let's talk about that. Once you got into your recovery and you started helping other people, why that mission now? Why are you out there helping other people?
Yeah, it's just obviously it's so personal to me, and I mean it's a family disease, and I look at everything my family had to go through, and for me, if I can help one family not have to go through that, then I consider all this as a win. I remember my mom said to me one time, she said when she was alive, she said, every time the phone rings at night, I'm preparing myself for a phone call saying, ma'am, we're sorry, your son is no longer with us, and, in the moment, it really didn't affect me that much. But when, I started to get some moments of clarity, I look back at that and I was like, wow, like my mom was preparing herself for my death, and here I am thinking, oh, I'm only hurting myself. What's the big deal? It's my life. It's my decisions. Like I was hurting everybody that cared about me, and I deprived my mom of a good night's sleep for years. Um, I remember being in a rehab one time, and like I used to go to this rehab like often. It almost became like a toxic enabling relationship. Like I knew I could just, if things got really bad, I could just check into this rehab and they'll let me sit there for 30 days. And, I really had no intention of doing the right thing. It was just kind of like, just, no other option. And I remember I was at the nurse's station complaining one time about, I can't sleep and you're not giving me the right medication. And, if you don't give me this medication, I'm leaving, like that was some kind of big threat, like, oh, please, Dan, don't leave, and then nurse said to me, she said, you know what, Dan, like right now your mom is sleeping. So maybe it's your turn not to sleep. And that was powerful, right? Because, what she meant was like the only time my mom got a good night's sleep is if I was in jail or in a rehab or in some type of facility because, at least she knew I wasn't going to die that night, and, once I started to get some clarity, all these like kind of things that happened throughout my life started to kind of really resonate on a deeper level. That's why, something I always say today is like somebody may not be ready to get clean and sober today, but we can never underestimate the power of planting seeds, because maybe like a year from now, somebody will be sitting somewhere and be like, oh, you know what Dan said a year ago, like now that makes sense. They might not just have been ready to receive that message then, but I kind of got into this whole field. It was like I was very active in AA and NA, and I was working kind of just like a bunch of like, just jobs that weren't going anywhere. Like there was a guy in AA who was like a carpenter, and there was a plumber and a landscaper, and they would all keep me busy and give me work, but it was like, where am I going like career wise? And I was, I had a large gap in employment from years of incarceration and, full arm sleeve tattoos. It's like no experience in anything. Like who's really going to hire me? And one thing I always kind of had a knack for is kind of speaking openly and honestly and being really vulnerable about recovery. And, a buddy of mine from AA was working at a treatment facility, and he said he could kind of get me in on like an entry level position. And I said, why not? What do I have to lose? Let me give that a shot. And, I got my foot in the door over 10 years ago at a facility, and I was, working the graveyard shift, just checking in belongings when people came in and just, doing the real kind of frontline grassroots part of the recovery field. And I just haven't stopped, and I've been able to kind of carve out a really kind of nice career and nice life for myself with it. And it's just like the best of both worlds. It's like I'm able to make a career out of it, and I'm also able to impact and help people, on a daily basis, and it's, if there's that saying, right? Like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I really kind of, believe that, right? Especially today. So, right now I'm working at a place in Marlton, New Jersey called Tribe Intensive. And, actually one of the owners who founded the place is, ex-Marine who battled addiction. And, I just really feel like I finally kind of like really found a home, because, I've worked for a handful of treatment facilities, like all different levels of care. When I say levels of care, what I mean is like, there's like the detox level, the residential level, the outpatient level, and I just kind of really feel like I found the home at this place, and my values and mission align with the companies. Because when you get into the treatment world, sometimes things get, sometimes people forget why they got into this in the first place, right? Like,
Yeah.
it becomes less about helping people and more about just, insurance reimbursements and
Right.
things like that. And where I'm at now, that doesn't happen. Like the mission stays the mission, and it's for me, it's just always been about purpose, right? I remember one time I was in early recovery. I was probably clean, sober, whatever language you want to use, for like a year or two, and I was just kind of like, but like, now what? Like what comes next? And I found that what comes next by working in this field, and it's just been great, and just forever grateful that like there's a saying in recovery, right? Like, it's getting that life beyond your wildest dreams. And I just feel like I have that, and it's such a miracle, like, because again, I'm that guy who was on the side of his dad's house, just like wanting to die.
Yeah, doing something and supporting people, it always helps when
I remember being in there's a town in New Jersey called Patterson, which
freezing up there. Sorry. All right. So I was just saying that, when it hits closer to home for you, that's when it's almost not like work. It's helping other people, like with me trying to help veterans with that transition. I struggled for so long with it. It hit close home to me. And that's why, if I can help these other veterans do that, that's what does it for me. But let's talk about the new perspective support services that you're working with.
Sure.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's just a little side project I started. It's my LLC. I kind of do some things through that. Motivational speaking, interventions, and just some like work with families. It's kind of whatever somebody needs from me out of there. I'm willing to do. The motivational speaking is a big, kind of a big passion of mine. Again, I told you, I think I mentioned I'm, anywhere from 6th to 12th grade, I try to get out to the local high schools and speak to the kids, and, it's funny. I was at 8th grade today, and, just that innocence in the room, and, it's just it's so great to see, like today, like we look at the youth today, and I think like it's a little different than when I was in high school, right? Like, I think when I was in high school, it's like if you didn't drink or use drugs, it's almost like you were made fun of. And now, like, we're slowly starting to see it's kind of flipping. And now, like, the kids who do drink and use drugs are almost becoming the kids who get made fun of, right? And I like to think that, like, all the work, that people in this field have done with breaking the stigma has kind of played a role in that. With the education, with the motivation, we're starting to see that kind of flip. And I love when I go speak at a middle school or high school and nobody has any clue what I'm talking about. Like, good. Let's keep it that way, and yeah, so, I just started the LLC. Again, I'm big on purpose and just kind of wanting to progress. Again, I'm always grateful for what I have, but always looking to achieve more. That's what keeps me hungry. That's what keeps me going. That's what, keeps me motivated, and the family piece is a big one as well. A lot of families reach out to me just kind of like, this is what's going on with my son. I don't know what to do. Can you help? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, let's talk, let's see what we can do, because addiction kind of tears families apart, and recovery puts families back together. I remember real quick, if you don't mind, I told a story about my mom, and when I was in the county jail and then, prison on my last ride there, remember my dad used to come and he used to visit me. And, every week he was a little older, and every week he looked a little slower, and every week there was more gray hair. And I said to myself, I said, man, I lost my mom in active addiction, and now there's a chance I'm going to lose my dad when I'm incarcerated. Like, if I got to make this right if I get a chance. And then I remember being in Bayside State Prison and sitting on the top bunk, and the guy below me was doing life for a double murder. And I was just like, what am I doing? What am I doing here? Again, I grew up in the suburbs, every chance to succeed. And like, this is the crosswords. Like, what direction am I going to go? And I just tried to make the right decisions, and then I remember one day this is about 7 years after I kind of got out of prison. I got a call from my dad's dialysis center, and they said, your father didn't show up for kidney dialysis. And I said, what do you mean my father didn't show up for kidney dialysis? He has to, and he was sick at the time. And right then I knew something was wrong. I called the security booth at his 55 and up community that he was living at and asked them if they could go check on him. And they said, they went over, knocked on the door, nobody answered, but his car was in the driveway and they had a key. They said, do you want us to use the key and go in? And, I worked about 10 minutes away. I said, no, I'll be right there. Because I knew what I was walking into, and I knew I had to be the first one through that door. I knew that's how my dad would want it. And I remember opening the door, and I looked in his recliner and he wasn't there. And then I looked in his bedroom and he wasn't there. And then there he was on the kitchen floor, laying there, cold to the touch, with the casserole burnt in the oven that he was trying to cook the night before. And when I tell this story, I always tell everyone, like, this isn't a sad story. Like, this is a beautiful story, because the recovery process gave me another 7 years with my dad for us to become best friends again, for us to repair that relationship, for him to say things to me like, I'm proud of you, and somebody else is too. And like, I knew who he meant. He was still so torn up from my mother's passing that he wouldn't even say her name. He would just speak like, somebody else is proud of you too. And that meant the world to me. And that's all because of recovery, right? So,
Right.
Whenever a family reaches out to me, I mean, I'll literally bend over backwards to kind of help them out. Because I just know how closely it impacted my life, again, for me, not knowing what my mom's last words to me were, to then on the flip side, having those extra 7 years to repair that relationship with my father when I wasn't sure I was going to get those. One Father's Day when I was in active addiction, I didn't have any money for a gift. I didn't even have money for a card. And I wrote my dad a letter. I said, Dad, I don't have any money right now, but one day I promise you I'm going to make you proud of me. And when he passed away and I was kind of going through his wallet, he had that folded up in his wallet. He held on to that. And that just, it just meant so much to me. And, again, that's what recovery does. It puts families back together, and whatever role I can play into doing that, I'll do anything. And then, with the book, I just said to myself, I have a 2-year-old son, and I've been saying all these kind of things for like 10 years, and there's been times where I've like ran groups and like I see somebody writing down something I said, and I'm like, I just started thinking, like, I probably have enough material to put a book together, and then I started, the doubt comes in, like, who am I? I'm not an author. How do I put a book together? And I did it, I locked in, and I self-published and found somebody to help me. And, It's called New Perspectives, and it's just a guide to achieving inner peace, in the recovery process. The beautiful thing about it is if you don't suffer from addiction or mental health, you'll still get something out of it. It's almost just like a kind of like a design for living, just, certain concepts just to kind of help you become the best version of yourself. I have some personal stories in there, have some education, some motivation. I'm a big quote and metaphor guy, so there's lots of quotes and metaphors and analogies in there. And at the end of the day, if nobody buys it, my son will be sitting at the kitchen table talking to his friends one day saying, "My dad wrote a book," so that pays for the price of admission right there. I just started, as I get older, I'm just thinking more and more about legacy, and what to leave what can I leave my son, and what can I leave this world, and I have a book that's here for life, and that's pretty cool, so
you mentioned leaving something behind in this world, right? And it's the reason why you do what you do, what we do, it's to help people, right? Because you never know where you're going to find that help from. I mean, we have the VA and we have other government entities that are helping the veterans, but like you said earlier, sometimes it becomes more about money and policy and laws, and we forget what they're supposed to be there for. And the VA in particular fails a lot of our veterans, but it's other groups out there. It's the VFWs, the American Legions, the other veteran groups that are helping our veterans. It's people like you and other AA meetings that are helping, those. And like you said earlier, helping one person, that will mean the world to people like us, right?
Yeah.
And if that's all we leave in this world, is knowing that somebody is still alive and moving on and healing that pain with their family, that will, that makes me happy. I don't know about you, Greg. I know you help a lot of people working through the church and stuff, and it feels better helping other people than making the money and doing the big things, right?
Listen, helping people. I always say it's like it's a win-win, because it makes that person feel good, they benefit from it. And inside it makes you feel good too, so everybody wins. Just if we can just help, there's that saying out there, right? Like it's like people are fighting a battle we know nothing about. So sometimes just being kind to people is helping them, and you don't even realize it. That's why I just try to just really be kind and just not have expectations for other people, and just understand that life's hard and everybody's just trying to navigate it and deal with it. And, just keeping that in mind, and not being so hard and so judgmental on people. Right. I think it's just something we all could benefit from, especially the state of the world today. It is just giving each other a break.
That's exactly right. With the world today, I mean, there's so much chaos and everything going on. And you mentioned in the beginning of the show about breaking that stigma, and you have that shirt there, Normalize Sobriety. So I want you, what is your message about that, about breaking the stigma with addiction? And there's still people too, right? They still can lead lives. What is your message for that?
Yeah. That's a good question. I guess just for the people going through it right now, there is a way out. There is that better life out there for you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to take some work. It's going to hurt a little bit. It might hurt a little bit physically. It's probably going to hurt more mentally and emotionally. But if you want that life that you deserve, right, it's out there. And there was a point in my life where, like, if somebody said that, I would be like, yeah, that sounds good, but like that, not for me. Like, I'm too far gone. I used to hate when I was in like a rehab or somewhere, and the speaker would say, if I can do this, anybody can do this, because I'd be like, yeah, like, Yeah, that sounds good, buddy. But like, you don't know my story. You don't know what I've been through.
Right.
Well, like, listen, I can sit here today and emphatically say, if I can do this, anybody can do this. Because, I was hopeless. I had a guy put a gun to my head one time in Paterson, New Jersey, and I said, go ahead and pull the trigger. And I didn't say that because I'm any type of tough guy or I'm any type of gangster. I said that because I just wanted a way out of this misery I was living in. And that's not the word. That's not life today, right? Like, I'm so happy and so grateful and so motivated to be here. So like my message to the person living in that addiction is like don't give up. Don't give up. I always use the word hope, HOPE. Hold on. Pain ends. We just got to be strong enough to go through it and go through a little pain, and not chase that instant gratification.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a little saying in recovery, right? If you chase your recovery half as hard as you chased your addiction, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it's hard for people to do that, right? Because of that delayed gratification versus the delayed gratification. Like, again, I take a drink right now, instant gratification. But then that recovery process, it's not instant. It's delayed. It's slow. It's spread out through time. It took, I have 15 years in recovery, and I'm still achieving things. It didn't all come back overnight. It took a lot of work. And for the person who isn't in recovery and is kind of just from the outside looking in, like maybe a family member who's struggling and doesn't know what to do with their husband, wife, son, daughter, brother, whoever, it's just understand, like, I can guarantee you they don't want to be living the way they're living. That freedom of choice has just been taken from them right now, and they're still good people. They just need some support right now. And I understand sometimes things are done where it's hard to support that individual, but like, you can still support at arm's length, you know what I mean? Yeah. And still be there. And, that's just kind of my message, to anybody out there still struggling, like, there is a way out, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep going towards that light.
Yeah. I think you said it right there. Life ain't easy. Recovery is not easy. There's nothing in this life that's easy. It's all going to take work, but it's about your support system. It's about finding that drive within inside of you. It's about finding that network. So, Daniel, I appreciate it. We're coming in the show. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the work that you do, with everybody out there. I know it's not an easy job, but, people like you are saving lives out there. So good luck with everything going on, and I hope you continue with everything that you're doing, man.
Great. I appreciate it. And you as well. You're doing important work out there too. So keep doing what you're doing. You too, Grams.
Thank you.
You got it.
You're doing a great job. We're very proud of you.
Absolutely. It was great coming on. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Daniel.
You got it.
Well, Grams, this is the end of the show, and normally he already wrapped it up, but I give all my guests 2 minutes, run through the 2-minute drill to speak your mind and speak your heart about what we talked about today, what the message you want to put out there, whether it's veterans, whether it's family. This is your 2 minutes to put out into the world what you want people to know.
I would like people to know, never, ever be afraid to ask for help. There's always hope. If you just say one kind word to a person, it could turn their whole day around. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just a kind word to get a conversation started that someone might need to hear. And you might be able to help that person off of that one word.
And that's coming from a lady that will talk to literally anybody. I'm telling you, we went to the stockyards this weekend, and she talked to half the people at the rodeo. I'm surprised we didn't end up riding the horses themselves. But Grams, thanks so much for coming on to the show, being the
Thanks.
co-host. I appreciate it. I'm going to kick you out of here now so I can wrap up my show.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
All right. That brings us to the end of the show with tonight's mission. A massive thank you, Daniel McGowan, for joining us. Daniel, transparency on the battle with drug addiction, the hard-earned path to inner peace is exactly the kind of tactical truth our audience needs to hear. Reminded us tonight that while in the storm might be external, the anchor is always found within. To everyone watching or listening, if you're in the middle of your own struggle, remember that full speed ahead doesn't mean you don't hit obstacles. It means you don't let them stop your progress. Connection is the best medicine, so reach out, check your signal, and keep moving toward that inner peace. Don't go radio silent on us. Stay tuned for next week, where we'll be sitting down with Doug Belkifer. Doug is the founder of Forging Truth and the creator of the Phoenix Quest, and we're going to dive deep into what it means to rise from the ashes and rebuild a life of purpose. Until then, check your gear, check your buddies, and keep it full speed ahead. Dismissed.
Life is like a duck. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Here at Military Broadcast Radio, we're teaming up with our friends at Die Tired, the veteran-friendly music band spreading strength, resilience, and mental health awareness one shirt at a time.
And check this out. Their brand new shirts feature broadcast beaker right on the breast pocket. A reminder that you can weather the storm, and you're never alone.
Shirts are only $25, and proceeds support giving veterans a voice. MBR's mission to teach veterans how to podcast and videocast. Because when our vets are talking, they're not overthinking. They're not second-guessing. Together, we stop the 22 stigma. Grab your shirt today at mbradio.us and hit the shop. Or go directly to toramerch.printavo.com/merch/dietiredband. That's toramerch.printavo.com/merch/dietiredband.
Suit up, stand strong.
Remember, we're unduckable together.
You're built tougher than the storm.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.